Today we're doing an AniLysis that you voted for. We're doing an AniLysis on Hedrick Chapman. That's right, big old Chappers himself. This video took quite a lot of research because he is one of the main characters in the story. He's not one of the main, he's sort of like a B character. If there's your main characters and then the next level down is your supporting cast. So he's quite a big one and he appears a lot in this series. The research for this video has come from a select number of books that I believed he played prominent roles in, and that would give us a good indication of who he is as a character, okay? So the main books that I looked at were the AniLysis Chronicles, The Visitor, books 31 where he got tortured, book 39 briefly where the Buffalo Human thing, book 51, which I believe is the last time we really get him mentioned in a proper way. But yeah, there's a few little instances, but most of the stuff here comes from the AniLysis Chronicles and this one here, The Visitor, which is a largely Chapman-based book. There's also a couple of bits from The Invasion as well, where he was first introduced chronologically in terms of the series. No, not chronologically, release order. So if I do miss anything, please do let me know, and I'll probably do a secondary video to follow up this one as an unlisted addendum. That's how this thing's going to usually work, but I'm hoping I've got pretty much everything we need to know as far as the series is concerned, okay? So he's a big character, and what we're going to do with this review is we're going to split it into sections. So first thing we're going to cover is name and appearance, then we're going to look at his character traits, and then we're going to look at the story aspect of his character, and then we'll just finish with a couple of miscellaneous details. There aren't many of them. So let's start off with Hedrick Chapman's name and appearance. Let's look at the quotes. My name is Hedrick, actually, but I prefer my last name. Most people call me by my last name, Chapman. He was larger than Lauren, maybe 5 or 6 centimeters larger. His hair was brown, not golden, and it was cut short. His eyes were also brown, not blue like Lauren's. Now you may be thinking that's not very much detail for such an established character in the series, and that's true. From what I saw, that's all we got of his description. So we got his name there, which he told to Elfangor in the AniLysis Chronicles, and then in the same book we get that very small description, and in itself it's not very descriptive. He's got brown hair, brown eyes, and he's 5 or 6 centimeters taller than Lauren. But given how we're not given Lauren's height, it's only a relative thing. It's not an actual measurement. We don't know how tall Chapman is. We just know he's slightly taller than that person there. And yeah, I don't think there's really any case where we learn more about his physical appearance later on. Not even in the body horror book that was book 39, where the buffalo morphs him. It just says he morphed Chapman's head. That's basically it. Why is this the case? I think I've mentioned this before. I think the reason why Chapman is such a prominent character and isn't described very much is because the authors wanted the kids reading this book, the young adults reading this book, to almost put in their own assistant principal into this role, which I suppose they thought would be appealing to kids. Oh, this Chapman, I bet he looks like my assistant principal. And they do that, which is why they probably hold back on describing his character too much, even though they then went ahead and gave him brown hair and eyes. But those are very minor details, really, and they're very common details as well. So that's why I think his appearance is so limited. I picture him, as I've mentioned before, almost like a Walter White character in early Breaking Bad. He probably looks a bit like that, in my opinion. Chris Grind did a good job of depicting him here, but he gave him a massive beard. Big old beard. What does he look like in this again? Let's have a look. So there he is, in there. Glasses, beard. He looks like a bit of a neck beard, really. Yeah. So let's have a look at some of his character traits. Now, some of these character traits will be intertwined with bits of story, but we'll cover the story later. Let's just look at his character, his personality. Let's start looking at some quotes. Telepathy. You use telepathy to talk. His gaze travelled to my stalk eyes, back to my face, then to my tail. That tail is a weapon, isn't it? Is it poisonous or does it just cut? Chapman nodded thoughtfully. That's why you have the dome, isn't it? You graze, like horses or cows, only you don't have mouths. So how do you eat? I spent most of my time with the humans, at least with Lauren. Chapman was as brooding as Alaran. This is stuff from the Andalite Chronicles. Now, as we go through this review, you'll notice that there's basically two Chapmans. So there's young Chapman, and then there's older assistant principal Chapman. And why I say they're basically two characters is because it feels like it. The problem with the Andalite Chronicles, and one of the reasons why I think it's such an awful book, is because it completely obliterates Chapman's character. Don't get me wrong, after this book in the series tried to obliterate his character too, but in this book especially, that's when we get, I think, the best of Chapman, for basically the only time. But in the Andalite Chronicles, he's a bit of an arse, and in those quotes there, basically the first interaction we get with him, we find out straight away that he's very cold and calculating. So in those quotes there, he's like it says, brooding like Alaran. He sort of looks at everything, keeps quiet, and just things going through his head, putting things together. But when he first talks to Elfangor, the first thing he does, rather than say, "Hello, alien," he starts looking at the bodily features and saying, right, that bit does that bit does that bit does that. He is very cold and calculating, and he doesn't hide it. He doesn't. Kid Chapman. Very much like that. And not only that, he is a bit of an arse. Let's have a look at these quotes to see how much of an arse he really is. "Shut up," Chapman snapped. "I'm not interested in the opinion of a kid." "Kid? Hey, you big jerk. Who is it that got the weapon after the ship stopped moving? Me. And who is it that was cringing in the back, begging for mercy? You. Anyway, I'd be surprised if you're even a year older than me." "You have wars?" I asked. "But you don't have space travel. Who do you fight?" Chapman arrived then, having arisen from a nap in his quarters. "We fight each other," he said. He winked one eye. "So, Lauren, Daddy went nuts, huh? Another whacked out Narmvet. I suppose some guys can't take it." It was Alaran who spoke. "Have you been in a war, human?" he asked Chapman. "Me? No, of course not. That war's over." Chapman seemed to snap out of a reverie. He'd been looking at Alaran. Now he joined the conversation. He looked closely at me, focusing first on my stalk eyes and then back down on my main eyes, like he couldn't make up his mind where to look. "Look, Elfangor, maybe we got off to a bad start, you and me. I wasn't in a great mood, you know. But hey, you guys are really missing out on something here. Do you have any idea how much money we could get for this technology on Earth? I mean, you could ask for anything." It was my turn to laugh. "What would we do with Earth money?" He shrugged. "Okay, forget money. How about power? We could snap our fingers and have all the presidents and prime ministers on Earth waiting on us. We could rule." "We're Andalites," I said, "not Yerks. We aren't interested in ruling other species." "Ah, well, that's good, I suppose. Yeah, that's a good thing. But we could bring peace to Earth, no more wars." "Maybe I'm with the wrong aliens," Chapman sneered. "Maybe it's too bad I wasn't grabbed by the Yerks. They sound like the winners." He's a snidey, sneaky little bugger, as well as being an arse, and very cold and calculating. Not painting a very good picture of this character. He's got very few, if any, positive traits, okay? One of the things that Lauren mentioned back there was that he was cringing at the back, begging for mercy. But then we also get this. Suddenly, he lunged forward towards the Dracon beam in my hand. Without even thinking, I whipped my tail forwards and pressed the blade against Chapman's throat. Chapman laughed. "See that? See how fast he was? I have a feeling you guys are a little more dangerous than you pretend to be, despite all your polite talk and promises." I felt like a fool. Not for the first time that day. The human Chapman had been testing me. It's strange that, isn't it? So, according to Lauren, when the Skritnar were taking them hostage, he was sat in the corner crying to himself. And then when the Andalites come along, these even more intimidating creatures with these massive tail blades, he actually lunges for the Andalite. Okay, so what's going on here? Is Chapman's character just not figured out at this point? Which it probably should be? Or is Lauren a lying little bitch? Who knows? Because that just doesn't make sense. "Oh, I'm cowering from that little old gran." "Come in, Mike Tyson, you try and give it a good wallop." It just doesn't happen, does it? You know, unless they're wholly deceptive. Not even then. Yeah, it's just bad characterization. Step one in Chapman's character dismantling, okay? But we also get a little snippet there of Chapman's paranoia, because not only is he cold and calculating, not only is he an arse, not only is he a sneaky son of a gun, but he's paranoid as fuck as well. This little trip involves danger, doesn't it? You boys are in deep. Like I said, I'm not an idiot. I can see you three are tense. I can see you're worried. Wherever it is we're going, you're scared, which means me and the girl here should be afraid too, right? I've got the one example there, and the previous quote was the other example I had, where, yeah, he's cold and calculating, and he uses that to find a route towards paranoia. So that's another little trait. And to top it all off, we get his motto, what he claims to be his motto, and it's typical mustache twirling, tropey shiteness. Let's read. Chapman smiled. It was interesting because already I was getting the feeling that not all human smiles were pleasant. We're not going to be kept out of a place just because the weather's bad. We adapt. We grab whatever's available and make the best of it. At least that's my motto. Grab what you can. So yeah, what good traits can we get from this Chapman character? Basically nothing. He has every bad trait. Okay? Yeah, by this point his character's already just completely demolished and scattered across the canyons of the abyss. Okay? And then we also get this weird bit. So in the story part of it, he takes the Jahar, which is the ship they're on, takes it down to the Yerks and says, I'm going to give you all the humans, right? I don't know what you're going to give me in return, just here, have my whole bloody human race, because I'm a mustache-twirling idiot. Little twat head. And then Elfangor thinks this about Chapman regarding the time matrix, which they also have on board. The time matrix. Everything came down to the time matrix. Was Chapman going to tell the Sub-Visser about it? No. It was Chapman's biggest bargaining counter. This human was like the Skritnar, self-serving, greedy, and very, very strange. All the Skritnar care about is owning and possessing things. And it seems the human Chapman was the very same way. So I truly believed he would not give up the time matrix just yet. I do think it's very strange that he describes Chapman as just wanting to own and possess things. He's just freaking offered to give away the whole freaking Earth. Here, have my whole race. That's because I'm a self-serving git. And I'm greedy. Yeah, it is sort of self-serving. I'll give it that. But it doesn't jive. He's self-serving in his own self-preservation. Self-preservation is different to wanting to own things. It's not mutually exclusive. In this case, it is mutually exclusive. In this specific case. So Elfangor's wrong. And not only is he wrong about that, but he was wrong on the whole. Because Chapman did tell the Yerks about the time matrix. So why do people like this book? I don't freaking know. So let's now move on to future Chapman, or present day Chapman. So he's now the assistant principal at the school where the Animorphs are attending. Okay, so we're leaving behind young twatty Chapman, who has basically no positive traits, is a complete self-serving, self-preserving twazzock head. So there's this interesting quote from the Visitor. And it's very short, but I think it says a lot. Nonsense, young lady, Chapman said, sounding like his usual assistant principal self. It's beginning to rain. Get in. The context of this line comes from this book where Rachel is walking home in the rain and she's just been attacked. Chapman, of course, doesn't know this. But she says she's going to walk home, but Chapman says, no, you're not. It's raining. Come on, in you come. I'm going to take you home. In his usual assistant principal voice. So this is the Chapman that they've known for a while now. This is what Chapman is normally like, because remember, the Yerks, at least in public, make the people act as if they normally would. So the usual assistant principal Chapman is the sort who sees a student walking home in the rain and offers them a lift home. Not for any nefarious purposes, just out of the kindness of his own heart. So already in this book, we're getting a completely different kind of Chapman, okay? He's not self-serving in this one, really, at all. And we shall see more of that going forward. But first, let's just have a look at Chapman at home as a controller. I won't go too much into this because this isn't an analysis of Innis 226, this is an analysis of Chapman. So let's have a look around the Chapman home and see what yerked Chapman gets up to and what we can assume he got up to before he was yerked. Chapman was there, in the living room. I could smell him. He was just sitting on the couch. I glanced at him and walked on. But then I stopped. My human brain sensed something wrong with the picture. Chapman was just sitting on the couch. No TV, no music. He wasn't reading a book or a newspaper, just sitting. Something was not right with either of the Chapmans. There was a sort of TV room with a pool table and some old chairs and a couch, but it was obvious that no one had used them for a long time. There were no human scents on them. There was dust everywhere, and I could hear that there were spiders. Inside the TV set. The only part of the basement that appeared to have been used was a path right across the floor. I smelled the scent that Chapman had tracked there with his shoes. He walked in a straight line across the basement to a door. It was a simple white painted door. He opened it and stepped through. Nearly 2 meters beyond the white door was a second door, this one made of gleaming steel. It looked like the door to a bank vault. Beside the steel door, there was a small, square white panel of light. Chapman pressed his hand against it. The steel door opened. It slid into the wall like the doors on Star Trek. By the time I was up, Chapman had reached his desk and opened a drawer. His bloody hand came out with a small pistol-like device I had seen before. It was a handheld Dracon beam. So in these quotes, we've sort of gone from normal Chapman and gone into Yerk Chapman, who we will cover more in detail in the Innis 226 video, but Chapman's home has this basement underneath where there's basically a man cave. And there's this door that leads through to another room, which is then blocked off by a steel panel. And in the room beside that, there's just this little desk. Do we think that was there before? So he's got the man cave and then he's got another secret room with nothing in it? Probably not. I imagine that was probably installed after he got yerked. So I don't think that that room has anything to do with the original Chapman. I think the man cave does. The now abandoned man cave. Of course, the Dracon beam has nothing to do with him. That quote is actually probably more suited to an Innis 226 video, so don't think too much into that one. But the man cave is where any man will typically have the man cave, where they need to get away, do their own thing, play some pool, watch some TV. So he just strikes you as a normal bloke reading this. Rachel is being a bit presumptive when she sees Chapman just sitting doing nothing and says, something's not right. Well, firstly, we already knew something wasn't right, Rachel. Secondly, not everyone needs to be watching the television. He could just be meditating. Who knows? Maybe that's something Chapman does, because remember, Melissa's in the house. And although she says, my parents are acting a bit odd, surely they're not walking around saying, oh, did you hear about the Underlight Bandits today? Oh, fucking hell, right, I'm just going to sit here and stare at the wall. There's a balance there somewhere, and we're not quite sure. We don't get that much on what Chapman's home life was like before, other than it just being relatively normal suburban life. They lived in a pretty normal looking suburban home. You know, 2 stories, a garage, a lawn. Nothing to make you think that the person who lived there was part of a huge alien conspiracy to take over the world. It's me and Melissa, I said. It was like her 12th birthday, or some birthday anyway, and we were out on her lawn playing with the present her dad gave her. So what? Marco asked. So? I passed him the photograph. It showed me and Melissa in shorts, and between us, a small black and white kitten. So her present was a cat. Just another couple of examples to show that human Chapman before the yerk was just your average guy. He got his daughter a cat for her 12th birthday. You know, not exactly a self-serving, greedy thing. Because from what I know about cats, and my wife loving cats, and me having now a few cats, I know that it requires a bit of self-sacrifice. So yeah, there's that. And he lives in a normal suburban home. He has a wife who, strangely enough, is just referred to as Ms. Chapman, which is typically the title you give to an unmarried woman, because it would be Mrs. Chapman. But it's clarified that he does have a wife, so, I mean, that's not really that relevant a detail, but yeah, normal guy. Until, obviously, he got the yerk in his head. So anyway, that is a lot of the traits of Chapman. We might cover some stuff later as we move on to the story, but yeah, let's do that now. Let's look at the story of Chapman now that we've got a good handling of his character. How are we first introduced to Chapman? We're first introduced to Lauren, who mentions him thusly. I'd already captured this shit before you two came along, me and the other guy, and we're both just kids, which shows you that these Martian jerks aren't all that tough. He's in the back, knocked out. The other guy, I mean. We led Lauren over to our fighter, and then we carried the second human across. He was unconscious. Bright red blood ran from a cut above his left eye. Are you okay? That big cockroach popped you pretty hard back there. So chronologically, this is how we're introduced to Chapman. Of course, in terms of book order, he'd been introduced a long time before, but yeah, this is chronologically where he's first introduced, and that's how we're going to do this. So he's been knocked out by the Skritnar, which again makes you wonder why... Earlier on, Lauren would say, oh, he was in the back cringing, begging for mercy, why he ends up getting knocked out with a cut on his eye. And then later on, he lunges at the... was it Alaran? No, I think it was Alfangor. It was one of them. So that doesn't line up. What seems to make more sense is that he lunged at the Skritnar as well and got knocked out for his troubles. Swack across the face, now unconscious. So, I don't believe Lauren. I don't believe her, sorry. But then that doesn't line up with... What does line up with what we're given later on of Chapman's personality is the cringing, cowering in a corner guy. So it's very confused. His character in this book is just all over the place. What happens next? Elfangor and his team are eventually diverted to the Taxon world, where there's a huge Yerk presence. They've got the time matrix and all that, and they're going to leave the humans on board this ship called the Jahar, which isn't a good idea. And firstly, let's look at Lauren explaining why it's a bad idea, and then look at what happened inevitably afterwards. Look, it's Chapman. I'm sure he's a nice guy and all, really. You don't trust him. If you leave the two of us here on the Jahar, he'll try something. I know he will. And I know you think we're too primitive to be able to fly your ship or whatever, but don't count on it. Chapman doesn't like you. The hatch of the Jahar appeared. It opened, and out stepped a creature no Yerk had ever seen before. It walked on only 2 legs. It held up its hands and said, hey, relax. You can put down the weapons. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to trade. Chapman! Chapman kept his hands raised and made a human smile. Then, very slowly, he stepped back into the shadowed interior of the ship, and when he reappeared, he was shoving someone before him. It was Lauren. She was bound with wire. Chapman pushed her viciously. She fell to the ground before Sub-Visa 7. That's what I have to trade, Chapman said. A whole planet full of that. So Chapman is going to trade the whole human race. He never says what for. He's just like, I'll trade. Well, what do you want? I don't fucking know. Here, have my whole fucking race. Just take it. I'll have, I don't know, a Mars bar. Give us a Mars bar. So this guy who previously was cowering in a corner, who was... and is with Lauren, who's this badass ninja, who's doing high jump kicks and everything like that. Fucking strong, independent woman. She just gets tied up by him and dragged out. I know this isn't an Andalite Chronicles review, but it's fucking fast turning into one. Why do people like this book? It's shit! Honestly. But anyway, this action that Chapman takes has actually long-lasting ramifications. And we actually get shown that in the Visa book. The Visa Chronicles, as some people will call it. Here's the quote from that one, specifically referencing Chapman. A report, just in. One of our people, a sub-Visa stationed on the Taxon planet, has just forwarded a report of a new species. I sat, staring, transfixed by pictures of 2 humans. They were gender differentiated, like Andalites and Hork-Bajir. One was male. He gave his name as Chapman. The other was female, named Lauren. Firstly, let's cancel Visa 1 for assuming their gender, because that's what happens these days. Secondly, Chapman has basically doomed the human race. Theoretically, because obviously they get saved. But For all intents and purposes, he sells out the whole human race, which leads to Visser 1 finding out about humans, which starts the whole invasion, starts the sharing, starts all of that. It's all because of Chapman, who previously we thought was this noble, average guy, and now he is the ultimate evil human being. Fuck you, Untitled Chronicles. And fuck you, Visser, for not retconning that shit. Not really Visser Chronicles' fault though, is it? So, take that back. That's a good book, unlike the Untitled Chronicles. Elfangor then runs away for a little bit, and the two humans and the Jahar are taken by the Yeerks. And then they rejoin together sometime later, after Arbron's been turned into a Noflit. They have a fight, and then the group reassembled, with the exception of Arbron, board the ship, okay? So Alaran, Elfangor and the two humans are on board, and they fly up. Alaran thinks that he's pushed Sub-Visser 7 out of the airlock of the ship, tumbling to his death. But what had actually happened is that was another Yeerk posing as Sub-Visser 7. Chapman was actually infested with Esplin 9466 at this point. So Chapman is also the first human, unless it was Lauren, because he's one of the first humans to ever be enslaved, and not only that, he was enslaved by the soon-to-be Visser 3 himself. Fucking hell. But Elfangor doesn't realise that this has happened, and when Alaran starts threatening to blow up this Yeerk pool, Chapman comes and does this, and Elfangor suspects nothing. I saw it out of the corner of my stalk eyes. A sudden movement, not fast but unexpected. Chapman! He leaped at Alaran and swung one of his strong human hands. With tightly clenched fingers, he hit Alaran in the side of his head. Alaran's head snapped back, more in surprise than pain. But it was enough. I swung my tail hard and fast. I turned the blade away and slammed Alaran's head with every bit of power I had. He dropped like a stone. He collapsed to the deck in a heap, and I saw triumph on Chapman's face. Triumph. Turns out this was all an elaborate Esplin plot, because, as I mentioned, he was in Chapman. And Elfangor only realises this when he locates the time matrix, unburies it, and then gets attacked by the three other members of his crew. Because it turns out Chapman had told the Yeerks about the time matrix. Funny that, isn't it? Talked about that earlier, if you remember. This is the quote to make that clear. Chapman told us about the time matrix, of course, but we needed you to show us where it was. I sucked in deep breaths, and then I bolted at top speed. I leapt from behind the time matrix, Lauren raising a Dracon beam in her hand. I fired. She dropped, twitching wildly from the energy pulse. Chapman fired, but he was weak and shaky from what he had just endured. I fired. The human dropped to the dirt. That last bit there is just further clarification that Chapman was the host of Esplin for a little while, when it says he was shaky and unsteady from what he had just endured. That's a subtle not that subtle, but an implication that he was just infested. And now he's not infested, and the real Chapman is on the side of the Yeerks, comes out firing at Elfangor. So real Chapman, human Chapman, kid Chapman, sides with the Yeerks. And then Elfangor takes him anyway. Elfangor knocks out everybody there, takes them back onto the ship begrudgingly, apart from Alaran, who he doesn't kill. He just makes the Yeerks chase away. Fuck's sake. And yeah, he takes Chapman because... Why did he take Chapman? This guy just sold out his own race, and was about to kill me without the need of a Yeerk in his head. I'm just going to take him with me, just to rescue him, yes. Even though I've got no actual connection to him, he's a twat and he's putting me at danger. Yeah, I'm going to rescue him. What the fuck, Elfangor? Jesus Christ. So now Chapman is on there, they tie him up. Might as well just throw him out the freaking airlock, for Christ's sake. They tie him up, and it turns out that Chapman is still trying to get them killed by the Yeerks, as Elfangor finds out quickly. And then he tries to get the upper hand, and mistakes were made. He's trying to goad me into using the time matrix. Remember, he's been a controller, however briefly. Sub-Visser 7 left him instructions, just in case something went wrong. Chapman knows that to use the time matrix, I'd have to return to real space. My guess is that the Yeerks placed a homing beacon on the Jahar. If we return to normal space, we'll light up every Yeerk sensor within 1,000,000 light years. I could see from the dark rage on Chapman's face that I had guessed correctly. Chapman! He had freed his legs and kicked Lauren's feet. She went down hard. The shredder skittered across the floor. The human was slower than me, but he was closer. His bound hands closed round the shredder seconds before I reached him. He fired. A glancing hit. The beam struck my left arm and left foreleg. I could stand, but I could barely move. "How'd you like it, Andalite?" Chapman crowed as he rose to a standing position. He levelled the shredder at me. "Oh, I have so had it with you," Lauren yelled. Still lying on the deck, she drew her legs up and kicked upwards. Both her artificial hooves hit Chapman right where his legs joined his body. She jumped off the deck and delivered an impossibly high kick that caught Chapman under the chin. Lauren snatched the shredder from him. She fired the shredder and Chapman jerked and went limp. If his character has not already been decimated by this point, it's been utterly ground into powder by now. Now he's just a fucking gag. He gets the nut shot, which is reserved only for comic relief villains. Or in comedies, just comic relief characters. Yeah, what have you done to this character, book series? Fuck me. And it gets worse. Right, I'm getting into angry mode again. Fucking hell. And yeah, Lauren is coming in with these fucking ninja moves. I mean, I get the whole strong, independent female character thing, but fucking hell, it doesn't have to take the piss sometimes, does it? Jesus. It's just, I can't read that and think, this is a believable situation. What the fuck is going on? I mean, I know it's sci-fi, so largely it's not believable, but things like that, like, it obeys some natural laws and some natural social interaction. The book doesn't stray away from that, so when she's freaking, rather than just knocking him, she's coming back and doing a high jump kick to his chin when she's just some idiot kid. It's like, what the fuck is this? Is this one of these new Marvel movies? Christ, is she Captain Marvel? Fucking hell. Anyway, this isn't a Lauren review. This isn't a Lauren analysis. We will get to her at some point. We're doing Chapman, who has just been completely humiliated, okay? So later on down the line, he's still unconscious, and there's the whole thing where the asteroids mysteriously turn into a black hole. Fuck you, and where is the AniLysis Chronicles? Here's the AniLysis Chronicles, and there it goes, okay? Fuck's sake. Awful book. But, so Chapman's unconscious, and the team touched the time matrix, but Chapman doesn't, so Alaran, Lauren and Alfangor go into the other dimension place, leaving Chapman on the ship that's now being swallowed by the black hole that used to be living asteroids somehow, inexplicably. So Chapman is presumed dead. He's presumed to have been swallowed by this black hole, but no, because when Elfangor becomes Alfangor, living on planet Earth after all is said and done, he sees Chapman. One day I got a terrible shock. I saw Chapman at the university. I was with Lauren at the time. Chapman did not recognise her. He did not know her at all. It made no sense. We had left Chapman back on the Jahar, tumbling towards a black hole. He should have been swallowed by the black hole, crushed and annihilated. Lauren tested him. She went up to him and said, "Hello, Chapman. Heard from your old friend Visa 32 lately?" He'd stared at her like she was confused. This Chapman recalled nothing. His memory had been erased. I tried to put it out of my mind. I told myself Chapman had a twin, or that it was some unknown physics of black holes, but it nagged at me. From then on, I felt a sense of being watched, and I wondered if, or when, the power that had rewritten Chapman's memory would make itself known. So Chapman's had his memory erased. Okay, why, how, and when is the series of obvious questions. Eventually the Elmis shows up to Elfangor, who asks... Let's find out what he says. "Humans are my people now. Like the human named Chapman, is he one of your people?" "You. It was you. You brought him back here and erased his memory. I undid an error in the space-time continuum. Chapman plays a part in what is still to come." Okay, so the Elmist admits, I brought Chapman back from the dead and erased his memory. Why? Because he still has a part to play. What part to play does he have? Okay, so let's now go through the main series story, okay, behind Chapman, and hopefully we'll get an answer to that question by the end of it. So we first meet Chapman in the main series, of course, in book 1, The Invasion. At the construction site, Jake hears a familiar voice, and he doesn't realise who it is until later when the animals do a bit of spying on the beach sharing meeting. I crept a little closer. I had to look hard to see him with my dog's sight, but then, when he turned just the right way, I saw him. I recognised him. It was someone I knew, someone I saw every day at school. None other than Assistant Principal Chapman. My assistant principal was a controller. Item 1. We still have not found the brats who were at the construction site, Chapman said. His voice was hard. I want them found. Visser 3 wants them found. Does anyone have any clues? Well, I suppose we get a description of his voice. His voice was hard as nails. Okay, so this is the point where we find out that Assistant Principal Chapman is, in fact, a controller at the meeting. Now, there's contradictory stuff here regarding, okay, what's the level? What's his rank? Okay, we get a few clues into that. So let's take a look at a couple of little snippets. I think he's some kind of leader, I said. It was him the other night at the construction site. He was the one who told the Hawk-Bajir just to keep the head. That is so Chapman, Marco said. Chapman is our assistant principal. He's also one of the most important human controllers. He runs the Sharing, the club that helps recruit unsuspecting kids into being hosts for the Yeerks. So I think he's some sort of leader. It's never said that explicitly, but he does have some level of influence over what's going on, because eventually we do find out that he reports directly to Visser 3, so he's not just some random subordinate, he's got some level of influence. He'd have some under his command. But one interesting thing there is that they say that he runs the Sharing. Runs the Sharing. Okay? What quote do we get later on in book 39? Then it whirled and stampeded straight for Chapman, the assistant principal of our school, member of the Sharing, and a high-ranking controller. They also say high-ranking controller here as if it means something, but notice there as well it just says member of the Sharing, whereas previously it was he runs the Sharing, now he's just a member of the Sharing. So what's going on there? I don't think the authors have quite figured it out at this point either. Like they haven't figured much of Chapman's character out much at this point, despite him being such an established character. It's disappointing. So in The Visitor, this book here, we go into his basement, into his secret room, where he has meetings with Visser 3. And we also find out what his Yeerk name is. There was a sort of desk set into the wall. It was grey steel and very unusual looking. There were moored little light panels in various cheerful colours, and there was something that looked like a small but complicated spotlight hanging down from the ceiling. In front of the desk was a chair. A totally normal office type chair. Chapman sat in it. He ran his hands over a blue panel. Then he looked at his watch. He sat patiently, waiting. "Welcome, Visser," Chapman said in a very humble voice. "Innis 226 of the Sulpniar pool submits to you. May the Kandrona shine and strengthen you." So his Yeerk name is Innis 226, and that Yeerk comes from the Sulpniar pool. Okay, but again, this isn't a video on Innis 226. We're looking at Chapman, but that is still relevant information, knowing the Yeerk who has him as a host. Okay. One of the main aspects of this character and this character arc that actually gave it so much potential is the fact that Chapman had made a deal with the Yeerks. And that deal was that he would sacrifice his own freedom so that his daughter would not be taken. A very noble gesture, and something completely opposed to the character of the Chapman we saw in the Andalite Chronicles. Okay? So this is the context of all that, the deal, how it affects the Yeerks. Let's look at those quotes. Chapman's face actually seemed to twitch. It was the only emotion he had shown other than fear. The girl? But Visser, the agreement with the human Chapman. "You've made life very difficult for me," Chapman said. "Very difficult. If I have to let Visser 3 take the girl, my host will make life annoying for me. Do you know how tiring it is to have an uncooperative host?" When Chapman finds out that Visifree might just take the girl anyway, reneging on the deal, things get a bit heated, and for one of the only times in the series we see controllers actually regain some level of control against their Yeerks, showing incredible willpower. Peering through the slats in the side of the cage, I saw him stagger. His face was twitching like he was a crazy man. He seemed to be having a hard time getting control of his mouth. "Go get the girl," he said through gritted teeth. Miss Chapman started to obey, but then Chapman cried out, "Oh! Ugh!" He fell to his knees. He is fighting me." "Host rebellion," Miss Chapman muttered under her breath. "I can't believe it. I can't believe the host can fight back this hard. It's because of Melissa. They're fighting for their daughter. And they will not stop fighting. I can't maintain my cover with this host waiting to attack at every opportunity. I have to be at the school every day. The host is beaten and exhausted for now, but in a few days he will strike again. He's not a fool. He knows he can't win. He knows each battle will leave him weaker and that eventually I will triumph." Chapman is, in this book, a noble guy who sacrifices his freedom for the life of his daughter, dignified, respectful, and a character you feel a great deal of sympathy for. Unfortunately, that doesn't carry through after this book, because the authors just thought, fuck him, we'll just turn him into comic relief. And he's used at various times throughout the series. I won't go into too much detail because it's more of an Innis 226 AniLysis video, but we'll give a couple of bits here. Firstly, in the conspiracy where Chapman, Innis 226, is tortured, which also includes the torturing of the host, which is why it's relevant here. I barreled full speed, heedless, horn down for the door. Wham! Crunch! The door exploded inward. The frame ripped, plaster and moulding showered. The Dracon beam and the statuette fired again, burning another black smoking hole in my armoured hide. It hurt just enough to make me madder. Now the Rhino Brain was enraged too. I drove forward, through the doorway, slammed into the far wall and knocked the Dracon concealing statuette over. So far the plan had worked. Axe would continue to interrogate Chapman, maybe get rough with him. This is what I'd led us to. Marco nearly killed, Melissa Chapman terrorised, and Axe left to spin tales of horror for a helpless captive. So in the conspiracy, we get the first demolition of Chapman's home, which has now got Dracon beams everywhere throughout it, because obviously they'd been infiltrated before, so that's a slightly relevant detail. More for Innis 226 again. But then, yeah, Axe, under Jake's guidance, tortures Chapman, and the real Chapman would be starved as well, as the book goes on to clarify. So, yeah, Chapman was tortured, okay? And then we get the madness that happens in Book 39, The Hidden. The Cape Buffalo stood there, quivering, twisting, its eyes bulging with panic, its mouth gaping in a silent scream. The scene was pretty bizarre all by itself, but in our world things always had to be slightly more than weird. See, the Cape Buffalo stood there, but instead of a Cape Buffalo head and face was our assistant principal's, Chapman. Again, another character who's basically been reduced to comic relief, and now a buffalo is trying to morph him, even though, if you go back to my review of that book, it broke the law, as in LORE, of the morphing cube, so basically non-canon, that book, so wipe it from your minds, everyone. And then, I believe one of the last times we hear from Chapman, at least the most notable time we hear about Chapman, was in the Absolute, after Marco and Tobias had stolen a tank from a train. Where did they decide to park it? Let's find out. The tank. I took a breath. Well, you know Chapman's house, nice 2-story? Jake sighed. How many stories is it now? I glanced at Tobias. 0? But the back deck will give Chapman a nice supply of firewood this winter. It's already piled up for him. And so this noble character's last moment of note in the series is that Marco and Tobias just decided, for no real reason whatsoever, to park a tank on his house, turning him homeless. As well as Miss Chapman and Melissa, who probably at this point isn't a controller, is still regular Melissa. So they've just made her homeless. Where's that book? Right, I can't throw it on the floor because it's a double book with the sacrifice, and I don't want to sacrifice the sacrifice's honour by having that one on the floor as well. And like Chronicles can fucking stay down there. So, yeah, the Chapman character is probably the worst character arc in the series. But it had so much potential. Mostly sprouting from this book. Part of the reason why that was actually a very good book. And there's a few clues throughout this as to why Chapman is such a prominent controller, because we do remember that Esplin remembers this character. Chapman might not remember Esplin, but Esplin would remember Chapman. Not only as somebody who he met before, but also the very first human that he saw, that he enslaved. Did he enslave any other humans? Don't believe so. But that was the human he enslaved. So even though he's not known for soft spots, Esplin does seem to have a bit of a soft spot for Hedrick Chapman. Visser 3's artificial voice said, "Don't forget, Innis 226, I gave you this Chapman body. I placed you in his head because I trusted you. I fed you his brain and made you my lieutenant. But I can suck you back out again if you fail me." Why would Visser 3 say that? I gave you this body because I trusted you. Specifically that body, Visser 3 needs to trust you with. Visser 3 needs to trust you if you're going to go into that specific body. Why? Because he's an assistant principal of the school? An assistant principal. Even a principal is not exactly high ranking in society. An assistant principal is the next level down. Why does Visser 3 prize Chapman so much? Why that particular host? Is it because he has a soft spot for Hedrick Chapman? Is that why Chapman is always the right-hand man? Even if he's not exactly a high rank, Visser 3 always just sort of keeps him close, almost as like a souvenir. That's what I think is going on there. And the potential that could have happened here was that Visser 3 really likes this host, maybe not on a personal level, but on a sentimental level. That's my first host. But at the same time, Hedrick Chapman is one of the most strong-willed hosts, whose daughter is constantly under threat from the Yeerks, and who will fight back, and there's this delicate balance, there's this deal going on. Why could that storyline not have proceeded to make more interesting stuff happen, rather than the bullshit we ended up getting, where in the Andalite Chronicles he became a mustache-twirling villain, and through the rest of the main series he became a freaking running gag. It's a shocking handling of a character. The biggest guilt that the Animorphs authors should hold is this character. You fucked up, I'm sorry to say. You fucked up mightily with this character. The rest of the series, largely, apart from characters like Taylor and stuff like that, is great, it's good. But you fucked up here. You really fucked up. And why am I saying that? Because I feel for the character in this book. And you tarnished him. You tarred and feathered and threw tomatoes at him. Shocking, but that's the Chapman character, as well as the various reasons why I think his character was ruined. That is the Chapman AniLysis. If there's anything you'd like me to add onto this video, please let me know, and I'll see if I can get onto that for you. It's been a long one. There's been a fair bit of research gone into it. I'm quite satisfied that I covered the main aspects of his character and who he is. I think maybe someday in the future I will lay out an idea for how they could have better used Chapman's character. For one thing, get him out of the Andalite Chronicles, put some other guy there. Because let's answer that question when in the Andalite Chronicles the Ellimist says he has a part to play in this war. Remember that? What fucking part did he play? You tell me. He protected Melissa, one girl, who was never really relevant to the Animal series following on from that. What part did Hedrick Chapman play in this? Was it again the Andalite Chronicles trying to create a storyline and just it never being followed up on? Probably. Please somebody tell me, what was the real plan with Hedrick Chapman before he became a fucking laughingstock? Anyway, that's AniLysis of one of the worst character arcs in the series. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you for the next one. Ta-ra!